have you guys heard of Richie Bros?
Yeah, they do the heavy duty equipment.
He was the CFO that took them public. Right. The government will never benefit that many people with that kind of money ever.
I had another follow-up question about how you got into, it sounded like you started off in the banking system, then got into insurance, and then went into mortgage or somewhere.
Yeah, so while I was at the bank, I started out doing like just day-to-day banking. Started out as a teller, worked up to a financial advisor, and then eventually was doing mortgages while I was a financial advisor. But you're also doing other things like line of credits, credit cards, banking accounts, investments. You're doing everything as a financial advisor. And then I graduated sort of into like an investment specialist role, and that's where I was doing more wealth management, managing, wealthy investors' money. And then I sort of decided like I could do a better job of this on my own. I hated the conflict of interest at the bank. Yeah. I hated sales quotas and targets, and we were talking offline.
Did you have a mentor that inspired you, or did you have someone that inspired you? Because usually I find that people that take that leap have someone, they're like, this guy's showing me a path, I just follow his path and I can get there.
So it was actually, my mentor was in the banking system. Okay. And so he worked at RBC's wealth management department. Right. And I remember meeting him like it was yesterday. I think I was like 18 years old. I remember meeting this guy at Terminal City Club, and he's like, come meet me there at 7 a.m. or something like that. And I'm from Delta. I had to hop on a train and get down there. I had to wake up at like 5 or whatever, and whatever. I get down there. He's at Terminal City Club. I show up in like jeans and a t-shirt, and I was like, well, this is like the coolest place ever. Mm-hmm. And then I get there and I was like, oh, I'm here to meet, so-and-so. And she's like, yeah, he's just finishing his morning swim. He'll be up in like 30 minutes. And I was like, is this guy Batman? Like, he's doing a morning swim? Who is this guy? Who am I meeting? He sits down, he's wearing a $30,000 watch, a very nice suit. And I was like very intimidated, but he's the nicest guy ever. Mm-hmm. And we really connected because I was lucky in high school where I was a bit of a nerd. So I had like really good grades, but I was also a jock. I was playing sports at the top level in the top, tier of soccer in BC. And he was the same. He was like a semi-professional rugby player. And up until that point, I thought I was gonna be a professional soccer player. I was like full on. I was like, I'm gonna go play in like the Premier League or something. But this was sort of my backup plan. And he essentially just told me about like, okay, you could take that competitive drive and put that into this field. And I asked him like, what does your day-to-day life look like and all that. And it sounded great. It sounded like a job I could do. And he pretty much would just be like, all right, go do this. And then I'd go do it. Like, go do this course.
How did you get this meeting with him?
So, no, I was lucky enough in high school to get a scholarship through what's called the Smollett Foundation. The guy who runs it have you guys heard of Richie Bros?
Yeah, they do the heavy duty equipment.
He was the CFO that took them public, so you can imagine how wealthy he is. Wow. Shares trade at like $40 a pop. He's probably got like 2 or 3 million shares. Right. You can imagine how wealthy he is. Yeah. He's done very well for himself. And he's here locally, and he runs this foundation, and he gives scholarships out every single year. And as a kid, I was like, oh, this guy's so nice. As an adult, as a financial planner and a wealth advisor, I was like, oh, that's a huge tax write-off. It's a huge tax write-off. He's nice, but this is what I mean about being wealthy. It's good for society. Think of how many lives that man has touched, and then through us, how many people I'm able to help because of this direct investment from this one guy. The government will never benefit that many people with that kind of money ever. It takes a private business owner to do it that way, in my opinion. Wow. But that's a whole other story. And then but he was not the one who paid for my schooling. He gets his friends who are also wealthy to donate, so they get the tax write-off. His friend was the person who paid for my schooling. Mm-hmm. I told him I'm confused. I don't know what I want to do in university. He's like, hey, you seem like you'd be really good in this. Because before that, I actually wanted to be a lawyer. I realized that it's not for me. There's a couple other professions I realized they're not for me, and I was confused. And he's the one who introduced me to this guy at RBC. And the guy at RBC, while I was doing my undergrad, he's like, go do this course, go try to get this job. And I would just sort of every year, I'd write him an email. I did this. What do I do next? That's it. That was like, I have the whole email thread.
Are you still doing that now?
No, not anymore. Okay. And I'll explain why. We're a little bit, not rivals, but like that's what, we're competing now.
You're just competing with every person you come in contact with. It's phenomenal.
That is the point of a good mentor, is he gets you to a point where you're ready to spread your wings and do it for yourself.
Exactly.
And I think if mentorship is done properly, at some point you should be further along than he is.
I get to stand on his shoulders.
Exactly.
You need to be able to pass on the torch.
Absolutely.
That's just the best part about it.
Some people just timing works and industry changes, it works out.
100%. So yeah, I went through the path. I started out the bank, and then when I graduated from school, I'm just a workaholic. Like I was going to school full time at UBC studying economics, but also working full time at TD as a full time job. So I'd like go to class, sleep in my car, put on a suit, and then go to work.
Right.
And I was like managing money for UBC professors while I was at UBC, and they didn't know I was a student there.
Right.
Because I was working at the UBC location, like the Kerrisdale and Point Grey. If they find out now, I'll probably get in trouble, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
I'll be sure to send this.
I got a question. So what your mentor did for you, is that duplicatable for regular folks, or do you just need a ton of money to do it?
What do you mean?
So how your mentor, he paid for your scholarship, or he paid for school fees. He also took time out to kind of shape you, with people. Connect you, shape you, improve some of your skills that you're working on, also guide you, right?
Yeah.
That part, the guiding part, the invitational things where you're meeting other people, that part seems fairly easy because there's enough knowledge out there to be able to kind of curate from just general knowledge that we have, right?
Yeah.
How do we get to the part of being able to give out scholarships to touch people's lives in that way that want to go to school?
You either start your own foundation, which I personally think is stupid. There's so many foundations out there. You don't need your ego tied to it. You're better off writing a check to someone's foundation where they've already built the foundation. So it's better, your money will go a lot further in that vehicle that's already created rather than you starting from scratch. We have so many organizations that get started from scratch because it's derived from like ego, but it's like, why not just write a check into a well-oiled machine? I can go and start a Call Aid, or I could just give it to Call Aid because he's already got the logistical process there. Yeah. Right? There's no ego that should be involved in charity. And so, yeah, you could literally just write a check to a foundation like the Small Lake Foundation or like all these other places. And then even now, like I don't donate to that foundation, but I mentor kids now as an alumni. So like I'll do talks, I'll teach all the kids about money. I'm mentoring a kid who didn't make it to the foundation, and I was part of the selection committee, and I was really fighting for this kid. He didn't get selected, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna coach you for 2 years. Do your first 2 years, they'll reimburse you afterwards. Like you could still give back with your time. Of course. So it's like, it doesn't have to be the check.
There's a reward at the end of it, right?
And that's your job. It's literally your obligation to open the door behind you.
Right. We want to create better people in the community.
Yeah.
This kind of came up briefly, and it's deep, and I hope you don't mind sharing it. You kind of touched on it, and we kind of glossed over it, but I did remember it. And it stems from this video I watched on TikTok this morning. Young family, I think the son graduated high school, and his dad bought him a car. And I left a comment on this picture, and I put on my story, whatever. But the comment I left was, you gave him the gift of a car, but you took away the gift of desperation. Yeah. And I think a lot of people that do really well over time, they have a level of desperation. Yeah. And you said something that I could see why you're doing well is because there is that level of desperation. Is that something you want to talk about? That's the first.
We can, but yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Talk about.
I was just gonna say I spoke with a lawyer this morning, and he's doing very, very well for himself. And a conversation we had was like, how do you keep your kids hungry? Because he does like extremely well for himself. He's one of the top lawyers in BC, if not Canada, and he's a very young guy as well. And he said that's the biggest struggle at that age is like, okay, he came from like nothing or a rough childhood, and he's done very well. And he's like, how do I pass these skills onto my kid without spoiling them, but also not robbing them of the gift that I've been given? It's just, I'm yet to find someone who's figured it out because parenting is extremely difficult. But I think, yeah, having that pressure of doing well it's a blessing if you see it that way. Right. It could also cripple you, but if you see it as a blessing, then it absolutely is. But yeah, I grew up in a house where it wasn't good growing up financially. Like we just had no money. I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm a wealth advisor now, and that's what I do, and I help people. Yeah, I even like have a nonprofit where I do free financial planning for single parents, people with disabilities, immigrants. I was like growing up, I checked off all three of those. So it's like, how do I give back to those people now? But I think there's a certain level of hardship that's very, very good for you. And I think it also makes you grow up very quickly. And to an extent, again, it can be a double-edged sword. Growing up that way also made me extremely empathetic. Like, bro, I can't watch commercials without crying. Like, it's just, I'm like, I feel everyone's emotions very deeply, and it could turn you completely cold and bitter. But I just view everyone of like, I don't know what you're going through. Like, how difficult must your life actually be? And I think it comes across very well in your business. Like, I genuinely care about my clients. Like, I take their burdens. And there was like a couple nights ago where I was working on a mortgage file and I couldn't sleep all night because I was worried about this guy getting his financing and whatnot. And you only get that when you genuinely care. Right. So yeah, I do think there's something to be said about having that desperation when you're growing up and it being either fuel to, you know, light your flame, or it could just like completely cripple you the other way. And I don't think it's your fault if it does one or the other. I can imagine if you're young and you deal with trauma, how that could very easily, you know, like break you to an extent. And I don't think people should feel bad about not being ultra successful because they came from a bad background. Like, you don't have to do that. It's just, if you can flip the script, it's endless fuel.
Totally.
Right?
You could like just channel it, go to that deep dark place, and then
it's fuel. Exactly. It's a renewable energy source.
Yeah.
It very much is.